Hey Star Fam, welcome or welcome back. My name is Laura Black and this is Blacklight Astrology. This video is not for any real reason. I was just sitting around in my room tinkering with the chart of the United States of America, just being curious. This is what I do in my spare time. I look at whatever chart pops into my head. And, you know, us Americans over here in the US are having an interesting time. And so I thought, maybe I could share some of this. Maybe there's somebody else out there who might be interested in this as well, or at least my take on it. So I pulled up a video and here we are. There's a few things I want to talk about, but I guess I'll start with some of the most basic pieces of this chart. And this is really, I mean, by no means is this a thorough uh, analysis of the state or of the chart of the United States. This is, first of all, just one of the charts of the United States. This is the chart of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. This is one of the most commonly used charts for the United States, but my analysis here is not by any means thorough. Of course, never the final word. Really, some of this I'm really barely going to scratch the surface, but there are some things evolving that I find personally fascinating and want to talk about. So I want to start with the very, very basics. The sun, the moon, and the rising sign of this chart, uh, which gets really, really involved because there are a couple of fingers of God. There are two yuds in this chart. And if you know me, if you've had a reading with me before and you know anybody, if there's anybody in your world or you yourself have a finger of God in your chart, you know that I am a little bit obsessed with them. And I didn't realize that the United States of America had two fingers of God. So I'm going to go into that a little bit today because for one of them, the sort of fate, the fated timeline that is associated with the finger of God has just begun to open up for the second time in the history of the United States. It has happened once before, twice if we want to get into the nitty-gritty details of it, but only once before in the way that it's being activated now, and I will explain what I mean. But first, the basics. This particular chart used for the United States has a sun at 13 degrees of Cancer. It is conjunct Jupiter, technically. It's a little bit wide orb, but for the sun, for the luminaries, I like to use a 10-degree orb, so I'll count it. And there's Venus snuggled up against the greater benefic. So the sun, Jupiter, and Venus in Cancer. I find this fascinating because Cancer is this water sign, first of all. On the very base level, water is about the unspoken realm. It is about what's felt and not seen or said. It is nurturing and healing, especially Cancer, the first and the most powerful water sign. We call it cardinal water. This little signature would suggest, just on the surface, that there's a real desire to create a sense of safety and security, Jupiter on the sun, a sense of national freedom, a sense of joy, a sense of expansion, the pursuit of happiness, we say over here, especially with Venus in tow. Like that's liberty and justice for all. It's such a sweet signature. But I never realized before that the sun is in the eighth house of this chart. So there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. And I'm going to come back and touch on this in a moment, but the eighth house, the house of Scorpio, does deal with what is our, I want to say, first of all, our downfall. It is our shadows. It is the place where things die and are reborn. It's the place where it's like skeletons in the closet. It's also the place of debt, lending, and borrowing. It's other people's resources. And I find it interesting that we have a Cancer sun, the energy of home and family and safety and wellness, in that house of other people's resources. And just makes me go, when I think about how we got to be this kind of nation in the first place, you know? More on that in a little bit. But it is a sun in the eighth house, and being a personal native sun in the eighth house, yeah, true American right here, I guess. We're meant to shine in the realm of healing, transformation, and in digging up our shadows. Or we kind of drown, hello, Cancer, in debt. Eighth house. So yeah, just funny little surface takes there. But the sun in Cancer energy is ruled by the moon. So let's hop on over to the other luminary in this chart, the moon, which we have at 26 degrees of Aquarius. And I left up Pallas Athena here because we do have our moon conjunct Pallas, and this will become very interesting once we talk about the finger of God that is pointing to the moon in this chart. But our moon in Aquarius, very curious to be a Cancer sun, powered, the nation itself, powered by this energy of home and intuition and care. We care. And then the ruler of that energy, of that like battery pack, so to speak, is in this very detached, insensitive, kind of high tech sign of Aquarius. It's a sign of freedom for sure. Okay. That we value our freedom. This is a land of the free and the home of the brave, we say. I think that's interesting when you consider the North Node is in the sign of Leo. Uh, yeah, there's a lot here around land of the free, home of the brave, between those two signs, Aquarius and Leo. In fact, a lot of people would say that the United States energy itself falls somewhere on that axis of Aquarius and Leo. Maybe you've heard out there, as I have, that each nation, each country is kind of identified with a sign. Um, you'll see like island nations are often associated with Taurus. You'll see, oh, cut all that out. Who cares? So, an Aquarius moon that we care about freedom, we care about progress and innovation. And it's the moon is in the third house. Oh, I'm thinking of a friend of mine that has their Aquarius moon in the third house. It's the house of the goddess, the house of the joy of the moon. The third house, the house of Gemini, is a favored place for the moon. And in a birth chart of a native, this is somebody who has the ability to compartmentalize their feelings. I'm thinking of a dear friend and client of mine, you know who you are, that has an Aquarius moon in the third that has an experience emotionally of being kind of very, very detached and objective and really engaging mentally with their emotions. But that's not how emotions work. All you air sign moons out there, I know you know what I'm talking about. That is this nation that we're powered by this energy of care, question mark, emotion, question mark, empathy, question mark, under the sun. But that coding of Cancer is ruled by the moon, and that is where we have this ability to detach as a nation and kind of think, you could say, globally or universally or technologically. A lot to be said about the moon in Aquarius. The way that we care for our society, the way that we nurture and understand our needs. Well, on the dark side of Aquarius, we don't. All you Aquarian moons out there, I mean, you're free inside, but my little running joke for all of you is, oh, you're dead inside. It's not true. Some of my dearest, most cherished friends and people are Aquarius moons, and they're loving and nurturing and wonderful. Beebs, if you're watching this, I love you so much. But Aquarius means that's my little joke. It's they have this ability to take their feelings out of their body and look at them and objectify them and kind of problem solve that way. There are upsides to this. Aquarius moons are the ones who can really show up in a big emergency. They're not emotionally taken down or involved. It's a little bit like being a surgeon and having to work on a human being on your table. You kind of gotta like, I know I'm not a surgeon, but there's this idea of looking at the human body as, and knowing it's a human, but kind of thinking of it as a machine, looking at its parts and pieces and not being emotionally connected to this human. Invested, you care, but you have to be objective. It's like you couldn't operate on your own child, that sort of thing. Aquarius moons. There's a sense of emotional abandonment inherent in any Aquarius moon placement. I have had the odd Aquarius moon client that disagreed with that at first and then comes back after a while and was like, oh my God, that's true. We're my parents were there, but they weren't there. There was no emotional connection at all. It was just kind of detached and kind of absent. And there's that feeling with Aquarius moons. So we as a nation have that. But we do have Pallas Athena right there, smack on the same degree as our moon. I kind of love this. I kind of love Pallas Athena. It makes me think of the Statue of Liberty, which I realize was a gift from the French, but it makes me think of that. This beautiful sense of creativity and fighting for the right to put our creative energy out to do that through a way that cares a way of caring for the moon, nurturing everyone in society, Aquarius, of using technology and the high sciences to problem solve, to create a better world for everyone here. Cool. Okay. So there's a lot to be said for Moon in Aquarius and Pallas Athena there as well. This wonderful sense of creativity. But let's go on to the rising sign being in Sagittarius. So the rising sign, if this were a human being and not a nation, we would look at the rising sign and recognize that this is how this human being was at birth and then kind of got switched over into their ego, their sun and Mars. Those energies kind of took over, at least by puberty, if not sooner. And then, as this native human, if it was one person, ages up, then they're trying to rise up to their rising sign. They're trying to get back to their ascendant or ascend to their ascendant, you know? So there's a way of wanting to lean into the healthiest parts of the rising sign. And if we think about that for the United States as a nation, that when we were first born, so to speak, we were seeking more of an ability to expand, new lands, big adventures, manifest destiny became a thing. I'm not saying a good thing, I'm just saying it was a thing. This idea of justice and the pursuit of anything, really. And in this case, the pursuit of happiness, because the ruler of Sagittarius, this fire sign, is Jupiter. So we go look over at Jupiter, and this is a Jupiter-ruled chart. If you don't know the way we find the chart ruler or sort of the helmsman, what piece of this chart would be at the helm of this ship, if we were to pick one, that would be the ruler of the rising sign. In this case, Jupiter. And here we have Jupiter in its favorite sign, exalted in Cancer, that has boded well for the United States for a great many years. We've done all right to a degree, becoming a world power. This was, the Sun conjunct Jupiter and Venus. That is the signature that suggests, yes, we feel like we are blessed and, called of God. I mean, it's almost like religious zeal that this is a very blessed, a chosen society. I'm not saying it is, but can you kind of see it in the ego of the United States people? Yeah, it's an interesting setup to have a Jupiter ruled chart when Jupiter is both exalted and with Venus, the lesser benefic, in a sign that she really does well in as well, and the sun, the whole power, sort of the engine of this whole system. So a Sagittarius rising chart ruled by Jupiter means that Jupiter's movement in the sky is going to affect the entire chart, the entire nation. Well, Jupiter is currently in Cancer. So we are, as a country, having our Jupiter return. Happens every 12 years. But Jupiter is currently slowing down. Here he is over here in Cancer, and he's sitting right smack on top of our Mercury right now. This nation has Mercury retrograde in Cancer. Um, Very interesting setup there. If you know any Mercury in Cancer folks, I love you all. My father has Mercury in Cancer. One of my dearest friends, hi Bethany, has Mercury in Cancer. And they are incredibly intuitive people. They feel their thoughts more than they think their thoughts, But that can mean that they believe things. They have thought patterns based on their feelings. And to them, feelings are facts, And they have to learn how to trust their intuition and not be driven by a mindset of making sure, sensing what's not okay in the conversation and not being too manipulative with their gift of reading the room, because they really can. Mercury in Cancer really can read the room. Now this is a Mercury retrograde chart, and there's lots to say about that, but we'll dive into that more when we unpack the fact that the United States is about to have its Uranus return over the next couple of years. That is sort of just begun as Uranus got back into Gemini. That happens every 84 years. Not quite as big a deal as the Pluto return that we just had, which is our very first Pluto return as a nation ever, which was honestly my reason for doing this whole thing in the first place. It is why I got the urge to pull up this chart today and take a peek at it. So we will get there. But Mercury is being sat upon by Jupiter right now, and Jupiter is slowing to a halt. I think he's going to halt at 24 degrees. Let me just double check that. Could be 25. I think it's on November 11th that he goes retrograde. It is 25 degrees. There it is, 25 and 9 minutes. And on November 11th, he goes, and he stops and he starts heading back. So Jupiter retrograde, especially in the natal sign of the United States Declaration of Independence. Jupiter retrograde, which happens every year for a few months every year, but that's always going to tug on the entire nation. Doubly so while it's our Jupiter return, perhaps massively, significantly so while we're having a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, linked up with Mars in Sag. And it's just past our very first Pluto return while Pluto is heading for our south node, which he won't really arrive there until 2027, which is a massive, massive year for the United States. I mean, for the whole world. Good grief. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, lots going on with this Jupiter retrograde upcoming for everybody, but the United States, I think, is tugged by it. It's interesting to me that we've been in this government shutdown for the whole time that Jupiter has been slowing down to come to a halt. Is that true? Just 25 days or something like that now? Not quite the longest government shutdown we've had, which was also under the Donald Trump presidency last time around. Good grief. But uh yeah, it's we're coming up to our Jupiter return, and I'm curious what will happen for the nation under that. But some things that I think are the most fascinating about this chart. Before we dig into this Pluto return concept, I want to highlight the finger of God, two of them in this chart that I actually did not realize that we have two fingers of God for the American chart. And look, if you had a reading with me and you have a finger of God, or you have one in a composite or a solar return or something, you know that I am obsessed with a finger of God. I find them fascinating. I have two of them myself, and I have seen so many times really great astrologers just kind of completely miss some of the really juicy content that's coming up in a person's life. I saw it when I was in astrology school. I've seen it from some of my favorite astrologers in action, how they're just like not picking up on the timing of these fated events. And Yuds, especially Yud activation, which is when the fated event takes place. Yuds are fate, is what it really is denoting. It's like the most significant marker of fate in a chart. Now, look, the conversation of whether or not we have free will always, I mean, kind of keep me up at night. I don't know. My sacred mantra, I don't know. But I ask myself that all the time. The more I study astrology, the more I wonder, well, how much of this is really programmed in? But they say in most of the literature out there, whether it's real or just imagined or felt, the feeling of fate with a finger of God is certainly present. I have a friend who once went to NORWAC, the Northwest, what is it, the regional astrological conference, and she said that a speaker there said that a finger of God feels like you're on a short leash with the universe, and I loved that. A tight leash. It's not up to you. When you have a finger of God, there's something in your life is going to go down in a very specific way on an extremely specific timeline that you can track with astrology, but it's only going to go down this one way. And in fact, you signed this contract before you were born. And what it universally seems to mean in my research is sort of the buck stops here. All this energy is being funneled into one issue in the chart. You can see the funnel, you can see the finger. And the native Yud bearer is apparently somebody in a family line, a family system, or in this case, a nation in the world that promised to bring something to an end, kind of break a family curse, or create a family gift. And I have seen it creating a sort of curse as well. But there's definitely a promise, a conundrum to be dealt with, and there's an itchy sense of purpose that we feel very clumsy in coming into. Every yud bearer I know has this frustration in their life where they feel like no matter how they try to take their life in whatever direction, they kind of get smacked back into this one issue again and again and again. And this becomes very pronounced when we start to approach yud activation, full-blown fate activation, which works like this. When you have a finger of God, what's happening is you have two planets that are sextiling one another. In this case, I'm including Mercury. We could tie in the vertex and the part of fortune. We don't really need to. Let's leave that out of it for a second. But it's Mercury, the mind, communication systems, even technological communication systems, phones, computers, vehicles, transportation, things of that nature. But definitely how the mind works, what we're thinking about, how we're learning, what we're interested in, and how we share that information. That is sextiling, we could say Neptune on one hand, but moreover, it's the midheaven, the 10th house cusp, known as the MC or medium celli. The midheaven marker is at 25 degrees. And, Neptune's there too at 22. So Neptune in the midheaven, Mercury, and down here we have the moon and Pallas Athena. And it's sort of like a slingshot. These two planets or placements, in this case, the midheaven, the legacy, the career, if it was a native individual, but definitely a reputation in the world, which is fogged over by Neptune in this chart. There's so much to unpack there, from religion to art and artistry to uh, a sense of mystery or illusion or secrecy or lies, a bit of manipulation on the dark side about what's happening there. Neptune kind of fogs over anything it touches in the chart, adds a dreamy quality, adds a spiritual quality or a creative tint to it. And Mercury, these two planets work really well together. Neptune, Mercury, or Mercury and the midheaven. They go great together. But they have this conundrum, this planet down here, in this case, the moon, and you can add Pallas Athena, that is sort of spilling the energy from each of these planets. And the energy from those two planets is being funneled or kind of forced into, in this case, the moon. So what happens is we see activation of a finger of God. The moon is the conundrum in this chart. It's very clumsy and it doesn't really work consistently very well because there's all this leakage. We could say that these inconjunct lines, 150 degrees between two planets, these are quincunxes or inconjuncts. It's a stress aspect. It's a stressful configuration, the finger of God. It's like the two planets at the base, Mercury and Neptune slash the midheaven, are flowing the energy really well. It doesn't take much effort to get those two to connect beautifully. Um, there's a lot here in believing whatever it is we want to believe, tuning into, Mercury is the human level of mind, and Neptune we could just nickname the third eye. It's our crown chakra, maybe. It's a way of connecting to the unseen realm, the great mystery of life. Um, and those two placements are working well together. But there's this other thing happening down here that's kind of clumsily forcing energy from each of them. It's getting funneled into, in this case, the moon. And there's a lot of leaky energy. I call these inconjuncts or quincunxes. I like to call them cringe lines or lines of regret. There's a lot of spilled energy, and so it gets really messy. And the native yod bearer or the country that has a yod can't seem to get all three planets to work well together. It's like the moon is in the blind spot of Neptune in the midheaven and Mercury. So it's just there's a lot of spilled energy until all of a sudden it works and we don't know why it works, and it works in a way that the native or the nation could never have gotten it to work on its own, and it just works, and we don't know why. It's God, it's the finger of God. But we are being pinned by this finger until this activation comes through. The running joke is this Christopher Runstrom, for any of you who listen to his work on YouTube. He's so great, phenomenal astrologer. He did a whole take on a finger of God sometime in the last year, and he was saying the running joke is the finger of God pointing the way, or is it flipping you off? I feel that as a yod bearer myself, and I know some of you watching this are yod bearers, and I know you feel that with me. Because yeah, it can feel like that. You can feel like kind of chosen, not to like stroke the ego way too big, but you know, I am an American. We can kind of feel like you're being pinned, and sometimes the pressure, um, you feel this purpose, even though it's clumsy and you're not sure if you're doing it right or how or when, but you can also feel restrained, kind of in a chokehold. It's a little maddening. So what happens is one of the outer planets, one that we cannot see with the naked eye. We are talking Pluto, we're talking Uranus, we're talking Neptune. One of those planets will come along and pass over either the apex, in this case 26 degrees of Aquarius, the moon, or the release point, which would be 26 degrees of Leo, which I left the asteroid Hygeia up here because I found it fascinating that the release point for this finger of God, the moon yud in the United States chart, already has a character there. It's not a planet, it's just a little asteroid, but asteroids are pithy, packed with meaning. And in this case, we have Hygeia, which is an asteroid that describes health and the lessons we learn from how we maintain our health or not. So, health and sickness and the ways that it teaches us things. I thought it was kind of funny that the United States has Hygeia at 25 degrees of Leo, which has a lot to do with, let's talk about the sickness of Leo. So, the shadow side, like a dysfunctional Leo quality. This would be an inflated ego, insecurities, um, a lot of pride, a lot of needing attention and validation from external sources, a lot of being big and loud and kind of gaudy and over the top and like, you cannot tell Leos and Aquarians what to do. You know, that's the axis of freedom, freedom of expression. There's a lot in Leo about children and the inner child, a lot having to do with sex and sexuality and sexual expression. So I just thought it was really funny that we have Hygeia, this marker of how we learn our lessons about health or sickness from that area of the chart. And we have it in this sign of Leo. That spoke to me as an American citizen who has struggled with my own narcissism being raised in, well, the great American cult, but that's a story for another time. Still coming, friends. It's coming. We're working our way there. So this is what we call a boomerang yod. It's kind of like a slingshot. We've got Neptune, we've got Mercury, we've got the rock being pulled back, that's the moon, and then we release it straight through to the other side, and where it lands is sort of the solution to the conundrum, and that would be 26 degrees of Leo. So to learn our lessons from the sickness of our egos, to put it way too simply and kind of too fine a point on it here, but just to make the point land about the sickness of this very narcissistic, at least leadership right now in the nation. Um, enough said. Enough said. Okay. So when an outer planet passes over the apex or the release point, that is where we will see fate, like really hardcore land in fate. It's no small coincidence that Pluto, being in the sign of Leo, those are what we know as the baby boomers. And that's kind of the generation that's predominantly in power right now, this older generation that we know and love as the boomers. Big love to all my boomers out there. You know, I love you. My mother's a boomer. Respect. And also, the dark side of Pluto in Leo has been a vein of inherent narcissism. Not that all boomers are narcissists. I have a lot of really, really lovely clients that are boomers that have not a shred of narcissism in them. Honestly, some of my favorite clients. I'm thinking of my dear Celeste. If you're out there watching this, I love you so much. Yeah, a couple that I've recently met even that I'm like, oh, you have Pluto and Leo? I didn't know they existed in this, kind of lovely form. No, I'm joking. Pluto in Leo, though, that was a generation of kiddos, kiddos, natives that all had Pluto, an outer planet, right in this sweet spot. The later, especially the later, well, I guess kind of mid-range baby boomers, because that did bleed into some of the Pluto and Virgo folks, right? But if you have Pluto in the last decan of Leo, then there's something about your Pluto placement that is the solution or of the conundrum of the finger of God. But it is where you have sort of a core wound if you are a late degree Pluto in Leo native. There is a deep pain point, and it's in the examination of that. It's in the bringing that darkness to light and owning and integrating that shadow that is the solution to this finger of God conundrum. But that is there. Well, now we have Pluto in Capricorn in this nation's chart. And just over the last couple of years, the United States experienced its very first Pluto return ever, which takes 248 years for Pluto to go all the way around the sun and come back to where it was in any given chart. So no human being, of course, will experience this, but nations do. And when they go through their very first, this is always a time when that country has to kind of come to terms with its own shadow, and the shadow gets very loud and pronounced. And we have to investigate, how did we get here? Do we still stand for the reasons that we came to be? What is, in this case, in the sign of Capricorn, what is our history like? What's the economy like? What's the structure? What's the leadership and the government of this nation like? Talk to me about power, Pluto and Capricorn, you know? And just with this last election that we had in 2024, November of 2024, that was the kind of the final cut, the final incision of our Pluto return. So it's really significant time for the United States, and you can see it on the surface, this question of how do we get here? Uh, what is our dark side? Who's in power? You get me? Okay. The shadow of the United States is loud, and avoiding the shadow work would be the downfall of certain parts of the nation, in this case, specifically the economy. I mean, we have it in Capricorn, which rules whole economic systems, systems in general, and it's in the house of Taurus, which is literally the house of resources, assets, money, what is ours, what we grow, what we manufacture here, our skill sets, our core values. And the United States birth chart literally has a core value, second house, of extreme power, Capricorn, extreme Pluto wealth, Capricorn. You know, there's definitely a big capitalistic tint here. And I recall ever since 2008, Pluto entering Capricorn, a lot of growing awareness about the actual history of the United States. 2008 is when I personally, as a little ex-Mormon girl leaving that cult, started to think differently about the world I live in and the way that my country developed and the things that I was told about that, the stories that I was fed as a child versus reading more in-depth histories and different takes, you know, not written by the current people in power. And you know, there's a lot to be said about that. I'm not your history person. Don't listen to me for history and astrology. This is just my little random take of a yacht activation after the Pluto return of the United States. Um, so Pluto is now in Aquarius. What is he currently in 1 degree? He's just been retrograde a while, and now he's just gone direct again. Yeah. So he's going direct at 1 degree, and he will spend basically the next 20 years in the sign of Aquarius, 19 years now. So he's making his way slowly, and it's going to take some time for him to get to the apex of this finger of God. Because remember, here it is, it's pointing to the moon. So it's not like we're in the middle of the fate arising, but in my experience, the moment that an outer planet gets into the sign that the yud is pointing to, or where the release point lies, that is when the storyline becomes very obvious and begins to unfold. And you know, I think of my own yacht activation. The moment that Uranus got it into 0 degrees of Taurus back in 2018, I had an event, an experience in my life that kind of triggered all of this unfolding. And when Uranus got to my yacht apex, which is at 29 degrees, that's the last degree of a sign, but it took all 7 years of that, and then fate took hold. I was a professional astrologer that entire time, and I still didn't understand what it was, what the fate would be, mostly because it was Uranus activating it, and that's a wild card, but also because, we can't really know everything we see in the stars. But I experienced all that time of Uranus in Taurus working its way toward my Yud apex, this unfolding, this realization, this building storyline, and then fate hit as that finger of God got activated, which I'm still in the middle of right now because Uranus is not done with Taurus, is he? He's going to go back through this winter, and by the spring, late April, he'll be once again at the apex of my yacht at 29 degrees. Won't that be fun? So, the United States has now just begun the very, very beginning of this tour, of this building storyline that's going to become more and more apparent over time. And eventually, in I think 2040 is the year, 2039, it will get very, very close. But in the year 2040, that is when the United States will experience this faded marker. So I'm fast forwarding it here just for funsies. There we go. All right. So yeah, and 26 degrees is when it's really active. And it takes a long time. Pluto is a slow sucker. So he's going to get really, really close. Let's see, I've got it set now. He's going to get so, so, so close to the moon in the year 2039. I don't know if you can actually see my date and time over here, but 2039 is when he will get to like 25 degrees in some minutes, and then he's going to go retrograde. And then in the year 2040, that is when it will, for the first time, reach 26 degrees of Aquarius. Oh, and look, Hygieia will be coming along too. How nice. And that will be the full-fledged faded activation. I think that's fascinating because it will also be the approach of the United States' next Saturn return, which happens every 28-ish years, but Saturn in Libra, which is also my Saturn, so that'll be fun. My next Saturn return coincides with the United States. And the chart ruler, Jupiter, will be on the midhaven, which is one of the corners, foundations of the finger of God. And Uranus, the Great Awakener, will be hovering over Mercury, which is the other corner foundation of the Yud. So that is quite a time, the year 2040 for the United States. Not to mention the fact that the South Node will be on this independence, Declaration of Independence ascendant, while the North Node, this calling forward, this pathway forward, will be just on our descendant, just past Uranus, the the planet of rebellion, the Great Awakener, which is also the ruler of Aquarius. So very interesting. We are in the story unfolding. Now, okay, we've got so many years. We've got 15 years before we even get to this fated activation of Pluto hitting the apex of the odd. But stay tuned, folks. Maybe I'll still be making videos in 2040 and we'll pull this one out of the archives and be like, see, we talked about this. All right, let me pull this out here. Let's take a little look-see at the other finger of God, because wouldn't you know it, I am counting the ascendant here. I know some astrologers would disagree with me on this because a Yud aspect, a lot of the literature out there on it says don't include the nodes of the moon, don't include asteroids, don't include the ascendant or, any of the angles. I say phooey on that. I calls it like I sees it, and I sees it in the story, or at least my perspective on the United States as a citizen here, born and raised. So I'm going to call it. I'm going to use the ascendant of the Declaration of Independence in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. And oh, would you look at that? What's it pointing to? Jupiter. So the chart ruler is at the apex of a yod, and yes, I am including the South Node in Aquarius. Now I got to decide if I talk about Jupiter first or the South Node in Aquarius because the year 2027 is bonkers for the whole world, and I'm like mostly excited about it, but also what what did we sign up for, you guys? This is the party. I have to remind myself of that. This is from an astrological soul evolutionary perspective. This is the party. This is Earth School. This is a wild adventure. I like to when I start to get bogged down in fear, I like to kind of I guess you could say escape. I like to veer off into this Alan Watts dream of life kind of philosophy, or I'm like, look, if life is but a dream, Uh, and we're all fragments of the same source. Dare I say the G word God? I don't know. There's my little speech. I don't know what God is. I'll never pretend to know, but something seems to be going on here. So I like to stay curious with the sacred mantra. I don't know. But if we play with the idea that we're all little fragments of that, playing out different roles and perspectives, and this is kind of a the universe having a game with itself, Leela, the never-ending play of the universe, expanding to understand itself in all directions. Mm. If that's true, then life is but a dream. Then we're just having this extreme experience because it's the most fun. What's the story of creation in Hinduism? That Shiva and Shakti were sitting in nothingness, and Shiva comes along and pushes Shakti, and she falls through nothingness and says, "Oh," and lands in existence and looks around and goes, "Shiva, where are you?" And then she sees Shiva and she goes, "Oh, oh my goodness, I was so scared. Don't ever do that to me again. I was so afraid." Let's do that again. The story of existence unfolding. But I don't know. So if we're having this adventure, then this is just the most exciting party adventure because we were bored with all the easier stuff. We want this to be a risk and to not know if we're going to get by and how it's all going to work out. And we want a little, it's like a thriller. And boy, is it a thriller. So when I'm feeling too over to get overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, what is going on in the world? What are we doing here? This is nuts. I like to remind myself that this is the ebb and flow of life on this 26,000 year cycle that we're playing in, apparently, according to every ancient tradition on the planet. And we're just in the high tide, low tide, whatever way you want to spin it. This is just one end of the spectrum of the cycle. The Kali Yuga, yeah, I don't know. Go somewhere else to find details on exactly the timeline of what we're doing here. But nevertheless, this Jupiter ruled chart of the United States is also under a fate marker, an extreme fate marker. And it won't be too long before that fate of this Jupiter yod gets cracked open yet again. In fact, back in 2009, it got cracked open when Pluto passed over the release point. So let's look at that. Let's take this back to when Pluto got into the sign of Capricorn 2008. Here we go. And we all remember the market crash and all the big scary things. I was just finishing up. I was in undergrad trying to figure out what to do, and it was too scary to go out into the world and try to find a career. And I didn't still know myself or what I wanted. I was still breaking out of uh, a high control religious group and just didn't know. I didn't know anything. So I just remember that feeling of like, oh man, the world is scary and intense, and what even is a career? I didn't know what to do with myself. Well, the apex of this Jupiter yod is at 5 degrees of Cancer, and the release point of that would be 5 degrees of Capricorn. So the second that Pluto got into 5 degrees of arrived at 5 degrees of Capricorn, that is when fate really came to play. So let's fast forward this a bit. Oh, look at that. It was 2010. Ha! Wow, that's very interesting for me personally. That's when I moved away from the place where I lived in the high control religious group and came up to the Pacific Northwest and started grad school and found I thought, my purpose. Which started a whole other trajectory in my life of becoming an astrologer. 2010 was really, for me personally, the first edge of my first real like spiritual awakening. I had a cult dying, I left that and I had an atheist tint. And then 2010 was when I really came back to my quest through spirituality and got curious about it and open to it again, largely influenced by being up here in the Pacific Northwest. The nature, the culture, it brought me back into this sense of like, okay, maybe there is something bigger. I was still very, very angry and didn't know it yet, but yeah, 2010 was kind of the cutting edge for me of my first big awakening, which really opened up in 2012. Uh, but here in 2010, that was Pluto at the release point of this finger of God. So apply that into your own lives if you're an American citizen, because it was pretty big for us here in America. Well, there will be another activation of this finger of God that points to Jupiter. Let's take it forward now. Right now we have the planet Uranus that just got into Gemini, which is going to be the next 7 years of our journey. Uranus in Gemini, which will be the Uranus return of the United States in, I believe, 2027. What a year. But if we take this forward 7 years, Uranus will eventually, 2032, arrive in the sign of Cancer, at which point it's starting to open the storyline of our Jupiter finger of God. And it's going to backtrack back into Gemini for a few in 2033. And then by the summer of 2033, it's back in Cancer. And by August of 2023, we see full Yud activation and full fate coming into play. And how interesting that Mars, which comes around every 2 years, no big deal, but Mars will be in that sweet spot approaching that release point of the Yud as well at that time. Saturn will have just passed over the sun of the United States chart, and Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, and the North Node will be coming for Saturn, this Saturn of our chart. So there's quite a lot. The United States is in for quite a journey for the next 20 years, obviously. I mean, at least until 2040. Really, the rest of the journey of Pluto through Aquarius. It's a huge, huge deal. I mean, for the whole world, right? Pluto and Aquarius. It's like everybody's in for it. But yeah, ain't no small thing. People keep asking me, just my local community, friends, clients, when is it going to get better, Laura? And I have to kind of I never quite know what to say. Sometimes I have to laugh. Sometimes I want to give them a big hug and be like, just hang in there because I'm sorry. We were born in, I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial, right? 83, like cutting edge, first wave of millennials. And we were just born in really soft times. I had soft, cushy childhood. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of trauma. I was raised in a cult, okay? It was not okay. But generally, rationally speaking, I was born in cushy times. We have not lived through major wars. We had kind of that Cold War thing going on in my childhood, but it was like the background threat of this Cold War thing. But for the most part, on American soil, we've been sitting pretty. And it's not going to be like that. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen on American soil, but we're in for a journey. This is no longer cushy times for the United States. Clearly, things are a changing. So, you know, I want to comfort people, but I don't like to sugarcoat things. As an astrologer, I mean, the name of my business is Black Light Astrology, in part because my name is Laura Black, and in part because I am a Gemini in the eighth house, with Venus and the moon in Leo on my midheaven. So, like, I want to shine a bright, beautiful, loving light of support and empathy. Hello, Venus and the moon on my midheaven in Leo, but it's ruled by my sun that is in curious little Gemini with Mars combust on my North Node in the eighth house. All of this is to say, I want to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all of it in great depth and detail. And I don't like to pull punches and I don't like to sugarcoat. I'm going to tell you what I really see. Sometimes I like to say the scariest thing just so that life surprises us and that doesn't happen. But I'm definitely not one to, when people say, when is it going to get better? It's like, if my people pleaser is on, sometimes I'll be like, just get through this year, just 2025 is a crazy year. But if I'm feeling a little more honest, it's like, okay, the 2020s are kind of, we're in for it. 2032, that's when it's going to get better. I kind of throw that out there. But as you've just seen, if you're in the United States, well, I mean, who knows? I'm not saying it's going to be terrible until 2040, but we are we are on a journey. It's a real journey. And this is, it's Earth School. It's not meant to be sweet and easy. And I think that's hard pill to swallow for a lot of us who have had very cushy lives so far. So, we've got some stuff coming. All that being said, let's take this outer chart away and come back down to the bare bones basics of this chart. Yeah, the Jupiter Yud, this Yud that speaks to freedom, that speaks to the sense of security. I think it's fascinating that Neptune has just gone into Aries, and when it did, the ruler, Mars, was in the sign of Cancer, home and family and mothers and security, safety. And what happened as soon as that started? Well, this whole conversation around immigration and who belongs here, Cancer, the sign of belonging, the sign of home. And families started getting torn apart, and ice got sent out all over the place. And yeah, it's there's some reckoning. We have some reckoning to do with the world, with ourselves. Um, so yeah, there's it's a complex chart. Let's just say that. Now, something I want to point out about some really, really big, huge events that are coming for the United States is that our South Node is in the sign of Aquarius. Oh, look, Pallas Athena is right on our South Node today. How cute. Um, And, that's we could talk about the era of AI that is Pluto and Aquarius. That's one of the easiest ways to encapsulate it. Although there are other really positive things to Pluto and Aquarius. Not that AI is completely a negative or a positive, but Pluto through Aquarius, we're going to see the dark side of technology. But Pluto through Aquarius also brings massive medical breakthroughs, huge technological shifts, because we see the extremes, Pluto, ruler of Scorpio, the extremes of the sign that it's in. So we're seeing the best of and the worst of Aquarius themes. We're seeing the dark side of technology and how it's separating us more from nature. And what that's doing to the human psyche, to the nervous system. We're also seeing where it can be incredibly helpful and make certain things easier. But it might, in the process of severing our connection to ourselves or to nature, of kind of disrupting the way that we're creating and using technology right now, that whole process of destruction might be the very thing that reveals to us what we need to do to regenerate this, to heal it, and to reconnect more deeply with nature. Whether that's on a small time scale of like in the next 20 years, or if that takes the whole next Pluto, revolution around the sun, the next 248 years. And we can hope that by the end of Pluto and Aquarius in 2040, whatever that'll be, 44, I think, that we will have found a way to regenerate the way that we create and engage with technology to work more with our humanity. But let's be real. Pluto and Capricorn certainly didn't transform the way our economy works for the better, now did it? So, we can dream, but we can also be realists and face reality. Uh, well, Pluto in Aquarius is moving on, and in a couple of years, in a year, the North Node will move into the sign of Aquarius. The North Node will actually land on the moon of this United States chart in 2026, less than a year from now. It will be bringing us into the apex of this yod, and the eclipses that take place at that time in 2026 will inevitably stimulate or sort of tickle the yod. I find that outer planets and eclipses are the things that will bring in massive waves of fate. And this alignment of the eclipses heading toward the moon of the United States, well, that only happens once every 19 years. So it's not as big a deal as, say, Pluto hitting the apex of the odd, not by any means, not by a long shot. 19 years versus 248 years, big difference. But eclipses are a sort of short-term kind of fate resolution. It's like the karmic cleanup from the last 6 months to 19 years. Eclipses happen every 6 months, and they happen in the same alignment every 19 years. So there's sort of like moving things into place from all of the activity and choices of whoever is participating in this chart since the last set of eclipses in this location. So that'll be kind of a significant time, but if we move the timeline forward here, the North Node is eventually going to line up with the United States South Node, as well as Black Moon Lilith and Pluto, Lord of the Underworld. So we've got Pluto, Lord of Hades. Oops, I just took it all away, didn't I? I took the wrong thing down. Okay, let me get back there. Here we go. Okay. So in 2027, just about 2 years from now. Oh yeah, look at that. I just landed exactly 2 years from today. We have the North Node right here at 7 degrees of Aquarius, which is smack on the United States Declaration of Independence South Node. And Pluto is approaching rapidly, and Black Moon Lilith has just passed on by. So the grand conjunction of Pluto and the North Node will be in November of 2027. Black Moon Lilith will have passed over just a while before. I'm not going to go into the details on Lilith right now about her actual timeline. There's true Lilith, there's mean Lilith. True Lilith will be windshield wiping back and forth over these spots over and over again for a 9-month period. Mean Lilith, as in the average calculation, will have a specific trajectory that most astrologers will track for transits and timing, but I like both Gemini that I am. So we can just say that Black Moon Lilith, the dark divine feminine, who also willingly went down into the underworld to hang out with Hades because she was not about she's essentially the story of the patriarchy unfolding. And she was not about it, the lack of logic that showed up with this like patriarchal stuff. I'll tell my story of Lilith when we get there. So she will be crossing over this place and kind of blended with these signatures. So this is very underworld-y. This is very deep dive, dig, dig, dig into the karmic dark side of the United States. The South Node is where we have been for lifetimes. And I try to conceptualize that when I'm thinking about the chart of a country. The South Node in evolutionary astrology for an individual birth chart, it's like, all right, that's your childhood was kind of steeped in that energy. It will really help you unpack what was going on in your childhood. And if you're open to it, past lifetimes, I always say to my clients, because you picked up in this lifetime right where you left off in the past. We think, I don't know. It always seems to fit somehow. So I like that idea at least. And for a nation, what does that mean? Like the United States past lifetime? Are we talking about all of the inhabitants who have ever been citizens? Are we talking about the leaders? Are we talking about the um, the kinds of principles that we built the nation upon? This idea of religious freedom and whatever else. I don't know. But there's something still very karmic, very heavy, very patterned that we came in with. We could think of the South Node of the United States chart as our previous existence in the colonies, as the things that happened as we broke away from the British Empire. It's something in that realm. That is taxation without representation that got us all upset. And so we broke away and we created our own sovereign nation. That could be very much the South Node in Aquarius in the house of money and values. Hey, I mean, that makes sense to me. So there's something truthful, something that needs to come up from the very root that's corrupt, that is in the dark, that is way, way down deep in the psyche and the souls of the inhabitants, the citizens of the nation. And Lilith, who pulls no punches, will have some things to say at this time. So this, regardless of the chart, this time in 2027, 2 years from the making of this video in October of 2025, this is a wildly potent time, like insanely so. It's hitting my chart in really massive ways. I'm a little like, okay, deep breaths. Fear is not a productive use of the astrology. This is one of my mantras that I have to use as an astrologer because I'm a big old chicken, you guys. I have Saturn and Pluto on my ascendant, all right? My lens on life has an extreme Pluto code of fear and control, Saturn. So, cult trauma. What are you going to do? I've been scared of this time, but that's not helpful. It's not productive, and it's not an intelligent or wise way to use this astrology. If we're looking at the astrology for a sense of learning and gleaning any kind of wisdom and empowering ourselves, self-actualization, and living in sort of a pulse and rhythm and breath pattern with our lives, then looking at it and going, "Oh my God, what that's gonna be," I don't know, and freaking out about it, like, how destructive is that? That's the antithesis of the use of astrology, and is where this tool of astrology that is just a tool, and it can, like anything, it can cut, it can kill, like a knife. It can be used for evil or for fear and manipulation, and we don't want to do that. So there's no point in looking at this and going, I'm freaking out. Instead, we want to look at this and understand, okay, life is an adventure. It's going to be what it's going to be, and we can see the timing of it coming. and do our best with where we are now and where we think the themes that we think are arriving, where we think we might be going. While also never giving too much power to what we think we see in the chart. But guaranteed, sure as shit, this nodal reversal of the United States, which happens every 9 years. But this nodal reversal, the North Node on our South Node with Pluto and Lilith, fresh off the heels of our very first national Pluto return, yeah, that's a big deal. That's a huge, massive, massive deal. And it coincides with, oh, wouldn't you know it, Uranus return for the United States, which is once every 84 years. So it's just our, what, third, fourth round of that? Ugh, don't make me math. I don't know. Somebody tell me in the comments if it's the third or the fourth Uranus return in the United States, or maybe fifth. Maybe I'm way off in my head, but don't ask this ADHD person to do math. Um, yeah, and Jupiter on our midheaven. So remember that Jupiter is the chart ruler, and he'll be right up there in our public image and reputation and legacy. Quite a show we're in for. Yeah. So big adventures ahead. I don't know. I hope that was interesting to you. I just like to tinker around with the chart of the United States every now and then, especially these days, and look at it and wonder, what are we doing here? What a country. It's an interesting time to be alive. It's an interesting time to be an American. Um, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, my take on it. I would love to hear any of your thoughts on it, whether you speak astrology or you don't. Maybe there's something I said that you resonated with or would like to contend with, share an alternative perspective. Maybe you're an astrologer that has your own take on this or another version of the chart of the United States. Give me a like, a share, a subscribe, drop your comments below and let me know your thoughts on this. And thanks for spending your time with me in this random evening, pre-Halloween evening of what do I do with myself? Let's look at some charts. Thanks for watching. I so appreciate all of you who engage with my content. It really, really helps every little bit. Not only the channel grow, but it helps me grow and feeling like my voice has value. If you know me, you know I struggle tremendously with my self-worth. I am a vulnerable narcissist, kind of a victim narcissist who stops myself from producing content for fear of everything. Name something under the sun. I'm a scaredy cat, and so I'm really trying to step into my fear a little bit at a time. And when you guys make comments, have things to say, I love it. I love it so much, and it brings out my passion and it makes me want to create more, and it makes me so happy to have people who like to engage with the astrology like that. So thank you so much to all of you who have ever left any like or comment or subscribed. It means the world to me. I so appreciate it. I hope you're all having a great day, and I will see you again soon for the full